So in order to understand Pascal's line of reasoning, I want to go back to the idea of practical rationality generally, as opposed to its specific application to belief in the greatest conceivable being. We mentioned in the lecture on assessing arguments and the associated chapter of the book Engaging Philosophy, we talked about practical rationality but did not develop it thus far in the lectures very far, so I want to do that a little bit more today. So the theory of practical rationality that I'll be using is known as the act, state, outcome, or ASO theory of practical rationality. It starts out with the idea that when you're in a decision-making situation, when you're deciding what to do, and that could be something momentous or it could be something that's very banal, such as whether to take an umbrella on a potentially rainy day, or how much to order when you go shopping, or what kind of things to take with you when you go on a long trip. You've got a set of available actions. In a given day, you've got, should I take the umbrella? Should I dress for hot weather? Should I wear a raincoat? Various other options that we might have in deciding how to clothe ourselves and before going out of our place of living. Set of available actions. There are also a number of possible states of the world, ways things might be that are outside of my control and that I might only have limited knowledge about. It might be that it's going to rain. It might be that it's going to rain very hard. It might be that we'll just miss the thunderstorm but stay perfectly dry where we are. Lots of possible ways in which the world might go in the future or in a way that affects us. Also, when we put together our available actions together with the possible states of the world, we have what are known as outcomes. So, in a situation in which my action is take an umbrella, and the state of the world is one in which it does in fact rain after all, I have the outcome of I'll probably stay dry because I'll use the umbrella if it rains. Whereas in a state of the world in which I took the umbrella but it did not rain, I'm burdened with an extra piece of stuff on me, namely an umbrella, that I don't need. It's going to weigh me down a little bit and be a little bit annoying, although not terrible perhaps. So those are examples of outcomes. And when I have these outcomes that I'm contemplating and deciding what to do, I assign, generally speaking, a value ranking to each of these possible outcomes, which ones I like more and by how much. I rank them and I try to put them in a certain kind of distance from each other in order to figure out how much I care about or like or dislike the various outcomes. These altogether come in the form of the ASO, or act, state, outcome conception of decision making. We can think about how this works in a little bit more detail by thinking about ways in which some of these lines of reasoning can go wrong. So I've got a cousin, let's call him Erwin, who says, I don't want to wear seatbelts, and I've actually got a note from my doctor that I carry around in my car giving me permission to go without seatbelts. Because, well, why? Because Erwin says, well, it's possible that I could go off the side of a road when I'm driving across a bridge, go off the bridge, end up at the bottom of a river or a lake, and be unable to get out of my car because I'm locked in my car with a seatbelt that for some reason malfunctions and doesn't let me out. In that situation, I would drown. Now, we might say, well, look, that's a possibility. That could happen. But it's not just enough when you're deciding what to do, whether to wear seatbelts or not just enough to think about one very bad outcome that could happen. The question is not just that, but also how likely or unlikely is that going to be. Likewise, you could buy a lottery ticket, and somebody could tell you, yes, the reason you should buy a lottery ticket is that, after all, you can't win if you don't play. To which one could reply, well, that's true, but we need to think about not just the possibility of winning, but also how likely it is I'm going to win, and weigh that against the fact that I need to pay money in order to buy a lottery ticket. The very fact that something very good or very bad could happen under certain circumstances does not make it rational for me to do anything at all thus far. I need to balance those considerations out against the other things that are possible outcomes of my actions, and in particular what's likely or unlikely to occur. Likewise, people often commit what's known as the person who fallacy. We often hear people say things like, I have a friend who smoked all his life and never got cancer, or I know people who never used seatbelts and never had an accident. The so-called person who fallacy is one that we need to avoid, just because the fact that that person might have been lucky because they smoked for 40 years, a pack a day, and never got cancer, doesn't show that it's reasonable for us to do the same thing. The question is not just that a good thing or a bad thing might happen or fail to happen, but again also how likely or unlikely those outcomes are. So we can think about how this methodology of the act-state outcome system works by thinking about an example. Suppose we're deciding whether to go to the beach, perhaps considering renting a beach house with our friends for one part of the summer. So here's a little matrix. On the left column, you've got your possible acts, either taking a beach vacation or not taking a beach vacation. And I should mention that when we're deciding what to do, it's up to us, if we formulate a matrix like this, it's up to us to decide how many rows we want to add to a column on the left. We might say, distinguish not just between taking a beach vacation and not. We might say, take a beach vacation with 5 or more friends, or take a beach vacation with 5 or fewer friends, or don't take a beach vacation with more than 5 friends. There are various ways in which we might fine-grain these different choices that we have, so to speak, but I want to keep things simple for now. Let's just distinguish between taking and not taking a beach vacation. And then as we go along the top side of the matrix, we've got 2 different possible states of the world. Namely, during the week that we're contemplating being at the beach, we can either have lousy weather or decent weather, where decent weather is decent enough to spend at least a fair number of days, majority of days, outside enjoying the beach, or lousy weather, not quite enough days to spend, not quite enough good weather to spend enough time out on the beach enjoying it. Again, you could also fine-grain these columns in such a way as that you could make more fine, precise discriminations between decent and lousy. You could say, for example, maybe we should have 4 such columns: very bad, bad, acceptable, and pleasant weather. But again, I want to keep things simple for now in order to make the general point. With these 2 elements taken together, acts and states, we then can see in the middle of the matrix 4 different boxes that talk about outcomes. Well, in a situation in which we take the beach vacation and have lousy weather, we go to the square in which they meet, so to speak, and we see lost time and money. That is, we took a beach vacation, we spent some time, maybe took off work or did something else that prevented us spending our time doing something else. And we had to spend time to rent the house or maybe also to get to our location and so forth. So we lost money, we lost time. We also had lousy weather, so we weren't able to enjoy the beach very much. If we go 1 box to the right, we say, okay, we took a beach vacation, but we had decent weather. We still spent time and money, but we also had fun. A lot more fun than we would have in a week in which we spend time inside because it's pouring for most of the days outside on the beach. Going down a row, we go to the decision in which we don't take a beach vacation. Well, moving to the right for outcomes, under lousy weather we have, well, we've got no loss of time or money. We spent our time doing something else. We didn't spend any money going to the beach, of course, but we didn't have any beach fun. We were back at home in our city or suburb or farm or something away from the beach. But if we have decent weather and we don't take a beach vacation, then sure, we've got no loss of time or money, but we might very well regret the fun that we would have had we been able to go to the beach under those circumstances. So this is so far qualitative, not quantitative. We can see how these different acts, together with the different situations, states of the world, give us implications for the outcomes. We now need to think about how to, so to speak, rank those outcomes. How much would you like or dislike them? Well, you've got to decide how much you like or dislike them. I'm just telling you my subjective opinion here about how things would go for me. I'm going to say the top number is my favorite, and things will go down from there, where 1 is my least favorite. So I say I'm going to give 4 to an outcome in which I took a vacation and I had decent weather. A 3 to an outcome in which I decided not to take a vacation and there was lousy weather that week. A 2 to an outcome in which I had decent weather but didn't take a vacation. No loss of time and money, but I did regret the fun that I would have had. And the worst situation is one in which I take a beach vacation and had lousy weather. You can put your numbers differently. These are just numbers that make the most sense for me, how much I would like or dislike these various outcomes. Now, to take the next step in using the act-state outcome method for decision making, I want to begin to take into account, as we mentioned before, not just how much I would like or dislike the outcomes, but also what are the probabilities of the different states of the world being as I suggested that they are. I'm also going to modify my numbers a little bit for these outcomes in order to indicate not just my preference ordering, but also how much more I like one over the other. So I've changed my first choice. I'm now putting things on a scale of 1 to 10. My first choice into a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. My last choice into a 1. My second choice into a 6. My third into a 4. And I consult historical weather patterns to determine that this time of the summer, perhaps the chances of lousy weather are 50%, the chances of decent weather are of course also 50%. Now I begin to, so to speak, multiply through, because I want to take into account not just these possibilities, but how likely they are, and that's going to allow me to weigh the different outcomes appropriately. I can weight them in light of their likelihood or unlikelihood, as the case may be. So I'm going to multiply the probabilities by these outcomes and the values that I assign to the outcomes. So we're going to see 1 being multiplied by 0.5 as you go across the second column from the top, 10 being multiplied by 0.5. That'll give us 5.5 as what's known as expected utilities for the option of taking the beach vacation. The same method for the second option, not taking the beach vacation, is going to give us 5, because we've added 6 times 0.5 to 4.5, 4 times 0.5, giving us 5. So these numbers in the right column are known as expected utilities. That is a value I assign that's modified by the probabilities that I have for the various outcomes, try it again, various states of the world. Those modify the outcomes that I have in mind. We can now see that the expected utility for taking the beach vacation is going to be higher than that for not doing so. And so the act-state outcome method for determining the rationality of my actions is going to say, take the beach vacation. It's not a slam dunk, but it still has a higher subjective expected utility than does not doing so. That seems to show that it's reasonable to choose to choose the beach vacation.